Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Judge.
Nice to see you, Senator.
Good to see you, sir. I want to follow up a little bit on something that Senator Booker talked about. What to you is justice?
Everybody treated equally, regardless of their position in society, powerful, powerless, rich, poor, Republican, Democrat, black, white, equal treatment, equal justice under the law.
I want to go a little further, press you a little bit on that. Is it justice if you have an unjust law that's applied equally?
Well, no, the unjust law is itself the lack of justice.
Let's narrow it down to punishment in justice. If I suggested to you that justice and the concept of punishment is when someone gets what he deserves, would you agree or disagree with that?
Well, I suppose it depends on what gets what he deserves mean, but yes, I think justice requires individualized determination of the kind of crime you did, and the mitigating circumstances, yes.
Well, let me put it another way. If is a person who commits a crime a sinner in the moral sense or a sick person?
Well, this is again probably beyond my competence. I think with justice comes mercy, and so I think we have to take into consideration all different kinds of things. I also think that the kind of crime that we're talking about is relevant to the question of what kind of person it is. So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me. I'm not trying to be evasive. I just don't know exactly what you're asking me.
Okay. Let me shift gears here.
Yeah.
Were you chief judge when coronavirus hit us?
Unfortunately for my successor, my term ran out just before coronavirus hit us.
Well, if you had been chief judge,
Yes.
would you have adopted a rule that said if one of our employees in the court gets coronavirus and goes to the hospital and is treated and is released and wants to come back to work at the court, it would be discriminatory to ask them to take a coronavirus test?
No.
Okay. Isn't that what happened with a lot of our nursing homes throughout the country?
You know, I honestly don't know what happened with the nursing homes. I don't know what they were doing with respect to I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be evasive.
Sure.
I really don't know the facts here. I mean, I think in an example you gave me, there's nothing discriminatory about asking people who might be infected from a public health point of view to be sure they don't infect other people. And if a determination is made they're not infected, then of course that's the end of it. Equal treatment doesn't mean we don't take into consideration the possibilities of different degrees of health in a particular circumstance. And I honestly don't know what happened with the nursing home. I know that it was terrible that many people got COVID in the nursing homes, and it was a major vector of the spread of the infection. But I don't know why that was, except that there are people cooped up in one place, and it's easy to spread that way.
All right. I think science tells us that keeping our schools closed has a disproportionate impact on poor people and children from poor families, and on families, including but not limited to children of color. At what point do you think our refusal of some of our leadership in our schools to reopen becomes a civil rights violation?
So, Senator, I completely agree with your description of the consequences of the school closing. I tutor two children in a neighborhood of Washington, D.C., where most of the people, students in the school are people of color, and I've been able to tutor them by Zoom every week, but they have, and they're taking classes by Zoom, and it's much more difficult, obviously, for them. Although they've done terrifically, not because of me, but they have, than it would be with people with other resources.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I don't, I think that, public officials have to weigh very serious competing concerns with respect to how to deal with COVID. There's just no doubt about it. On the one hand, we have to be very worried about sending kids back in their schooling. And on the other hand, we have to be very worried about not spreading the disease in a way that kills them, or more importantly, not more likely, their parents or their grandparents. And I don't want to be the person who makes that judgment.
I understand. I get it. Sorry to interrupt. I hate.
No, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
We just have limited time. You have written in one of your opinions, I'm going to read. I know you haven't memorized all of your opinions. You said the Constitution, quote, does not contemplate that the District of Columbia, may serve as a state for purposes of the apportionment of congressional representatives. That textual evidence is supported by historical evidence concerning the general understanding at the time of the district's creation. Is that still your considered opinion?
Yes, and I would say that is a case, one of my earliest cases, which taught me what it means to be a judge, which is to do something the opposite of what you would do if you had public policy concern. I think that citizens of the District of Columbia should be able to vote, but I didn't think that the Constitution gave me authority on my own to give it to them. And it made me sad, but it reaffirmed my role as a judge.
Okay. In my last 20 seconds, I'm going to ask you if you agree with this statement. Allowing, and I'm not suggesting the answer one way or the other, I just want to know what you believe. Allowing biological males to compete in an all-female sport deprives women of the opportunity to participate fully and fairly in sports and is fundamentally unfair to female athletes.
This is a very difficult societal question that you're asking here. I know what underlies it.
I know, but you're going to be Attorney General.
Well, but I may not be the one who has to make policy decisions like that, but it's not that I'm adverse to it. Look, I think every human being should be treated with dignity and respect. And that's an overriding sense of my own character, but an overriding sense of what the law requires. The particular question of how Title IX applies in schools is one, and in light of the Bostock case, which I know you're very familiar with, is something that I would have to look at when I have a chance to do that. I've not had the chance to consider these kinds of issues in my career so far. But I agree that this is a difficult question.
Thank you, Judge.
For his first question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't hear you. Did you call me?
I called you Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That sounds very good.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Director, I've listened from my office to your testimony today. Tell me who had the authority to call out the National Guard on January 6th?
My understanding is that the decisions to call out the National Guard, in one sense, are the responsibility of the Secretary of Defense, but in another sense, have to be.
Mr. Director, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think we can agree that the FBI had credible information that there was likely to be violence on January 6th. Can we agree on that?
Well, I don't know that we had assessed its credibility. We certainly had information that was concerning about the potential for violence in connection with the January 6th events. And as we discussed here this morning,
Right,
one piece of information that was most specific that I'm aware of was passed, quite
Well,
quickly.
based on that information, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we just keep nibbling at the edges and dancing around the issue. And I understand. I'm not asking you to throw anybody under the bus, Chris. I get it. But we need to find out what happened. Now, if you were king for a day, based on the information that you had, maybe not at the time, but later on, would you have called out the FBI? I mean, the National Guard?
Senator, as you said, I really want to be careful not to be armchair quarterbacking others. I think the National Guard, we have seen, can play a very important role in crowd
Excuse me
control.
for interrupting.
Yeah.
Boy, I sure, I'm not trying to be rude, but my time's limited. Well, who made the call not to, based on your information, who made the call not to call out the FBI, whether they should have or shouldn't?
Not to call the FBI?
I'm sorry, I'm tired. The National Guard.
Well, I would defer to others who were more involved in that discussion, but from what I have heard, what I have read, my understanding is that at one stage of the process, the local government was of the view that it did not need the National Guard's assistance.
Who do you mean by the local government? The mayor?
Yes.
So the mayor didn't call out the National Guard?
At the beginning.
What do you mean by the beginning?
Well, in the day or two leading up to the 6th. Okay. Then as to exactly how it played out on the 6th itself,
I understand
I'm not
that,
as
but
sure about. Yeah.
I mean, clearly our people were overrun by the nut jobs. So we're making progress here, okay? So the mayor or the city government decided not to call out the FBI, the National Guard ahead of time. What about the House Sergeant at Arms?
I don't know what role the House Sergeant at Arms played with respect to the National Guard.
Okay. How about the Senate Sergeant?
Same answer.
Okay. How about the Capitol Police, the Chief of Capitol Police? Did the Chief of Capitol Police make the call not to call out the National Guard?
I don't know the answer to that. My understanding is that the law enforcement officials here with responsibility over the Capitol, that there were differing views about whether or not the National Guard was appropriate and when at what level. But all I really know on that is same thing you've seen, in the press coverage of the events.
Okay. That's enough on that. I listened to your comments about diversity, and I thank you for your good work there. I think any fair-minded person has to conclude that diversity is a strength, not a weakness. But this subject comes up a lot, and I think it's going to come up a lot again. And that's not a criticism. That's just an observation.
Thank you.
Do you believe that the FBI is a systemically racist institution?
No. Now, having said that, I do believe the FBI needs to be more diverse and more inclusive than it is, and that we need to work a lot harder at that, and we're trying to work a lot harder on that.
Do you believe that the FBI is a systemically sexist or misogynistic institution?
Again, that's not the way I would describe the FBI that I know and see every day. But again, it's a place where we need to be more diverse and inclusive, and we need to work harder at that. And we are working hard at that, and we've got progress that we still need to make to at least to be satisfactory by my standards.
Okay. Fair enough. Mr. Director, have you ever been to Hong Kong?
No.
Wonderful place, wonderful people. The Chinese Communist Party is destroying it. If Congress passed a bill and said to the good people of Hong Kong who yearn for freedom, come to America. We're going to follow our friends in Britain. Say, come here. You want to get out from under the thumb of the Communist Party? Come to America. We welcome you. Do you think the FBI and law enforcement has the ability to screen for spies? One of the criticisms of the proposition I just stated is, well, we would be letting in spies. Do you think, based on your knowledge of security, that we could catch most of the spies? Well,
I yield to no one in my faith and confidence in the great work of the men and women of the FBI, but I will tell you that the Chinese counterintelligence threat is the greatest threat, certainly the greatest counterintelligence threat that we face as a country.
Right.
And the sheer number of what we would refer to as non-traditional collectors working on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party is something that is a massive resource challenge for the FBI.
That was probably an unfair question. I'm not asking you to guarantee anything. In the few seconds I have left, and begging the indulgence of our esteemed chairman, who's doing a much better job than Durbin, by the way. Oh, he's back. The Horowitz report. Can you tell me how many people you have referred for prosecution at the FBI as a result of the Horowitz report?
Well, for prosecution or for discipline?
For prosecution first. Just give me numbers, because I don't want to abuse my time.
Well, the prosecution issue related to anything to do with the Horowitz report is in the hands of Inspector.
I get it. How many have you fired?
So most of the people involved in the Horowitz report are former employees. Of the ones who are current, every single one of them, even if mentioned only in passing, has been referred to our Office of Professional Responsibility, which is our disciplinary arm. Now that piece, and this is important, that piece of it, because we're cooperating fully with Mr. Durham's investigation, at his request, we had slowed that process down to allow his criminal investigation to proceed. So at the moment, that process is still underway in order to make sure that we're being appropriately sensitive to the criminal investigation.
Okay. So you've had to hold up as a result of the criminal investigation. I'm sorry I went over, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sure glad you're here. Booker was just screwing everything up.
Senator Padilla, and I'm sure you'll do a better job than the previous questioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will do my best.
Might want to stick around for 1 second. Senator Kennedy has exerted a point of personal privilege.
Yeah, Mr. Jealous. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jealous.
Briefly.
And I will be brief. Transparency is one thing. But that's not what you talked about in your opening statement. Now, what I heard you say, Mr. Jealous, was that Chief Justice Roberts would not have voted the way he did in many of the cases you criticized, but for this dark money and corporate money. Now, that's what you alleged.
Sir, what I talked about.
It's serious as 4 heart attacks and a stroke.
Sir,
that has
please,
nothing to do with transparency.
Sir, I don't want to have a heart attack. I don't want you to have one. So just let me finish, please. And what I'd say, sir, is this, that the rigged system is pretty obvious when you see $17 million spent to push a nominee through, a pro-corporate nominee through. And the rigged system is even more obvious when you look at the hundreds of millions of dollars that are spent to push nominees through.
But you can't say something's
and then it becomes
rigged
even more
without
clear, sir, when you dig
how.
in and you see how many of the same donors
How is it
are
rigged? How
supporting
is
the
money?
Federalist Society, are supporting the campaigns of senators who will then preside over the nominations process. And the people of this country, sir, all we want is transparency, and that's bipartisan.
Yeah, but that's not what you allege, Mr. Jealous. You allege biggest doubts. You said you said that Chief Justice Roberts would not have voted as he did in some of the cases, but for this corporate dark money. Now that's a serious allegation.
I would refer you back to my testimony. It's all written for the specifics. What I described was a rigged system in which Chief Justice Roberts operates, in which the Supreme Court has become captured by corporate interests, in which the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which respectfully does not represent Main Street or any small
Let me turn
but
to,
only corporations, when 70% of the cases that it submits.
let me interrupt here just one
Okay,
second.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I abused my privilege, and I ask your forgiveness.
Thank you, sir. And I think it's Senator Tiller.
Kennedy is recognized from Louisiana for 5 minutes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Chairman Powell, I want to start unusually for me with a statement as opposed to a question. I have been very supportive of you and the Federal Reserve and its independence. That was my position with the Trump administration. It will be my position for what it's worth with the Biden administration. And in fact, I have said both publicly and privately, Mr. Chairman, that the single most important thing that was done to save the world economy, not the American economy alone, the world economy from melting down at the during the shutdown last March, was your decision to implement a foreign currency swap line when the whole world was not looking for treasuries, they were looking for dollars. There's an effort going on worldwide to blur the line between government and politics on the one hand and central banks and their independence on the other. I see every day central banks getting more and more involved in fiscal policy and lobbying legislators with respect to the adoption of fiscal policy. I've noticed that the Bank of England has announced in its QE program that it is going to stop purchasing corporate bonds from companies that it thinks has too big of a carbon footprint. I've noticed recently that the Reserve Bank of New Zealand has decided it's going to start in its policy making, its monetary policy, taking account of housing prices. Now, this is where I'm headed, Mr. Chairman. The Federal Reserve needs to maintain its independence in America. Your credibility depends on political independence. I give you Turkey if you don't believe me. And besides that, the Federal Reserve and the good people in it are unelected. They don't have democratic accountability. And my concluding point, and I'm just going to ask you to respond briefly. Some people are going to beat on you, Mr. Chairman, like you stole Christmas, to get involved in social policy in the guise of economic policy. And for the long-term health of the Federal Reserve, you need to resist that.
Thank you, Senator. So I do think Fed independence, and thank you for your strong support on that. I do think that Fed independence is an institutional arrangement that has served the public well over time. And I am strongly committed to continuing it. I also would agree that getting off of our home base and straying from our mandate is something that will put independence at risk over the long term, because we have this precious independence because we have a limited mandate and we stick to it. If we're going to be playing on every issue, then the case for our independence weakens. We should have as little. There should be very few examples of independent agencies that aren't part of the administration.
And you're one of them, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize for cutting you off, but I want to stay within my time, and I need to ask Secretary Yellen a question. Secretary Yellen, the Biden administration's plan, and it is your plan, to require the IMF to issue $1 trillion of these SDRs, new SDRs, is going to cost the American taxpayer about $180 billion. Now, your reason for doing that is a good reason. You say you want to help poor countries. But you and I both know that only about 10% of that money is going to go to poor countries. It's not going to help poor countries. It's going to help if they cash in their SDRs. It's going to help China. It's going to help Russia. It's going to help Venezuela. And besides that, under your plan, you're intentionally splitting the plan into two tranches of $500 billion each to avoid having to come before Congress. And I don't understand why it is efficient to charge the American taxpayer $180 billion, all of which we have to borrow, and you say you're doing it to help poor countries, and only 10% is going to poor countries, and even more is going to Russia and to China.
I'm sorry, it's not going to cost the taxpayer $180 billion.
Sure it is. You're going to have to borrow the money. You don't have the money sitting in a checking account.
IMF.
They're going to redeem those SDRs, not just the poor countries, but China.
There are many countries that can provide hard currencies in return for SDRs, including the United States. If the United States does agree to provide SDRs, it will have to issue treasury bills or debt to do it, but it will also
I rest my case.
I'm sorry, but it will also earn interest on any amounts that it converts on behalf of other countries, and it will be essentially a wash.
But the money will never be paid back.
And it will pay. It does. There is no money to be paid back.
Sure.
It doesn't matter. The interest that we earn on any excess SDR holdings offsets the cost of issuing treasuries, and it's essentially a wash, and it is not costly.
I disagree with you, Madam Secretary. I think no disrespect, but I think you're wrong. I think we're going to have to borrow all $180 billion of this.
I don't know where you got a number like that from.
Well, when China comes to redeem its SDRs and says we want dollars, where do you think we're going to get the money? We're going to borrow it. I've gone over. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but this is an important issue. I'll call you, Madam Secretary.
Okay, I'd be glad to talk about it offline.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Cortez Masto.
I think I'm going to call on Senator Kennedy instead. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Senator Booker. You're a fine American, sir. Ms. Abrams, can you hear me? I don't know where to look. I hate these Zoom hearings.
Yes, sir.
In terms of voter confidence in our electoral system and perception of voter integrity and election, let me start over. I'm sorry. In terms of the confidence that Americans have in their electoral system, do you think we're better off having an election day or an election month?
I think we are better off having a process that allows every single American the opportunity to participate in elections. And given that the initial notion of an election day was based on an agrarian economy that no longer exists for millions of Americans, and given the fact that we have a number of Americans who are limited in their access because in states like Georgia, there is no paid time off for voting, I think we have to make every opportunity to make voting accessible to every American. There is no other entity that
let me
would
stop
be
you
denied.
I've got a bunch of questions before you get off the subject and get me off. So you're okay with us not knowing, say, weeks or months after an election who the winner is?
Yes.
Okay.
We have had times in this country where we have not known.
Talking about the Georgia bill, help me understand. And I'm not interested in a 30,000-foot view. That's not meant to be a criticism. I'm speaking to myself, I guess. I'm not interested in platitudes. Tell me, you're against the Georgia bill, I gather. Is that right?
I'm against certain provisions of it, yes.
Okay, and I think you've called it a racist bill. Am I right?
I think there are provisions of it that are racist, yes.
Okay. Tell me specifically, just give me a list of the provisions that you object to.
I object to the provisions that remove access to the right to vote, that shorten the federal runoff period from 9 weeks to 4 weeks, that restrict the time that a voter can request and return an absentee ballot application, that eliminate...
Slow down for me, because Our audio is not real good here.
Certainly.
Could you start over for me?
Certainly.
Thank you, ma'am.
It shortens the federal runoff period from 9 weeks to 4 weeks.
Okay.
It restricts the time a voter can request and return an absentee ballot application.
Right.
It requires that a voter have a photo identification or some other form of identification that they're willing to surrender in order to participate in the absentee ballot process.
If I can stop you, that's where they're going to not comparing signatures, but to voter ID?
Yes, sir. And as Ms. Eiffel has pointed out, we would become only the 4th state in the nation to require voters to put at risk their identity.
What else? What else?
It eliminates over 300 hours of Dropbox availability.
Okay, what else?
It bans nearly all out-of-precinct votes.
Bans what? I'm sorry?
It bans nearly all out-of-precinct votes.
Okay.
Meaning that if you get to a precinct and you are in line for 4 hours and you get to the end of the line and you are not there between 5 and 7 p.m.,
okay,
what else? To start all over again.
Is that everything?
No, it is not. No, sir. It restricts the hours of operation because it now, under the guise of setting a standardized timeline, it makes it optional for counties that may be may not want to see expanded access to the right to vote. They can now limit their hours. Instead of those hours being from 7 to 7, they're now from 9 to 5, which may have an effect on voters who cannot vote during business hours during early voting. It limits the voting
Okay, I
hours.
get the idea. I get the idea.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this. Let me approach this another way. If a state decides to require a voter to prove who the voter says he is or she is, do you consider that racist?
Not at all, sir. Voter identification has been a part of the American theory of democracy almost from the beginning.
You're okay with it?
I support voter identification. Yes.
Okay. How about ballot harvesting? And I heard earlier you were talking about letting the tribal elders collect ballot. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where the parties, and believe me, both parties will do it and probably are doing it, pay operatives to go out and help people with their ballots and collect their ballots. Are you okay with that, or are you against that?
I don't think it's an either or situation. I think it depends on what the conditions are, what the rules are, but making it easier for those who want to participate in elections to do so with safely and securely, I think it's
So you're okay with ballot harvesting?
No, sir, I did not say that. I said because that is a term of art that encompasses a wide range of behaviors. And even your example.
I'm sorry, but I'm trying to get down from the platitudes and understand what you're for and against.
But sir, what I'm for is
help me with this. Let's suppose that the Republican Party wanted to hire people to go out and knock on doors of voters and say, have you voted yet with your mail ballot? And they say no, and then the operatives are told to contact the voter and say, let me help you with your ballot. If you have any questions, I can even suggest who you might want to vote for. And after you vote, I'll collect the ballot for you and you make it easy. Is that okay?
Sir, I'm both an attorney and a former legislator, and it is not simply the words that you're saying.
I'm an attorney and a current legislator, and I might want to trade places with you, but keep going.
And so my point is, as you and I both know, that the context, the rules, and the structure matters. Now, in the very narrow circumstance that you just described, if there are no controls and if it turns into buying votes, of course I object to that.
Okay.
But if you look at the piecemeal components that you're describing, and if we are talking about how do we make it easier for voters to participate in elections, I'm not certain what that looks like, but what you described in this very specific and narrow construct, it sounds like you're in violation of a number of different rules, not the least of which is buying a vote.
All right, let me ask you one last question. Our chairman's really indulged me here. Do you think it was a smart thing for President Biden to do when he called everybody who supported the Georgia bill a racist?
I think that this bill is grounded in racial animus. I think that the language that we are using to describe
Can I ask you how you know that, madam? I mean,
Because
it's an honest question. How do you know that?
Because for 15 years, the Republican Party of Georgia not only sanctioned but celebrated its vote by mail provisions. It was only after voters of color for the first time in 15 years successfully used those provisions in favor of the party that they disproportionately support that those rules changed. It is that for years, for more than nearly 2 decades, we had early voting hours that supported voters that were perfectly fine. It was only after communities of color used those provisions in
but why
excess
doesn't
of
that hurt black people and white people and brown people? This is what I'm
I
trying
think it
to.
hurts everyone. If you've watched me, I have fought for the right to vote for every person.
I
No
agree.
one is entitled
But that's
to
a
victory.
long way from the president calling people a racist because they support a state.
Sir, I'm responding to the question that you asked me. My point is that when your motivation is grounded in the race of those who are engaging in behaviors that you disagree with, that is racist, particularly when it is targeted at communities of color by people in power.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that. The chairmans have gavelled me. I just need to ask, how do you know that's what they meant?
Because we asked them not to do it because we showed them what the effect was, and they refused to answer, and they refused to abide. I worked with these people for 11 years. I don't believe that every single person who supported this bill has deep racial animus in their hearts for all purposes, but for the purposes of voting rights, when racial animus is your predicate, then yes, you should be held accountable, and those bills should be stopped.
Thank you. I'm sorry I went over, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Padilla.
I'm sorry, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Suggested that we have a competitive edge to compete on addressing these harms where we actually collaborate in a lot of these areas.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We now go to Senator Kennedy, remote. Can you hear us, Senator Kennedy?
I can hear you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. The time is yours. Take it away.
Thank you. It seems to me that in the guise of giving consumers what they want, a lot of our social media platforms first use surveillance to identify a person's hot buttons. And then they use algorithms to show that person stuff that pushes those hot buttons. This is called, as you know, optimizing for engagement. The social media platform wants a person to visit its platform early and often. That's how it makes more money advertising. In any event, when that person that we're talking about, as a result of those algorithms, gets all revved up with no place to go, he posts something outrageous. Not every time, but quite frequently. And that is why you can still find kindness in America, but you have to go offline to do it. Mr. Harris, I'd like a straight answer from you. I have a bill, others have a similar bill. A bill to say that would say that Section 230 immunity will no longer apply to a social media platform that optimizes for engagement. Would you, if you were a senator, would you vote for it?
I'd have to see the way that the bill is written.
Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me, Mr. Harris. Give me a straight answer. We all want to read the bills. Would you vote for it or not?
Well, I would be in support of a bill that had technology companies not measure as their primary mode of success any of the engagement metrics of time spent, clicks, shares, etc.
That's swell. But if the bill said, I don't like to waste time in these hearings. If the bill said no Section 230 immunity if you optimize for engagement, would you vote for it? If you don't want to answer, just tell me.
It sounds like a very interesting directional proposal. I'd have to know the details, but I'm sorry for not being more clear.
Well, you're being very clear. You're dodging the answer. Dr. Donovan, would you vote for it?
Yeah, when it comes to bills, the reason why I'm in research is so I don't have to make those decisions. But I would say that when we're talking about what these companies optimize for and the way in which it does optimize for novelness and outrage.
Doc, would you vote?
Please.
Would you vote for the bill?
I would vote for some form of bill that required oversight of these algorithmic systems.
All right. I mean, we have these hearings and I appreciate them, but we never get down to it. Everybody just wants, we all talk. I'm as guilty as anyone else, but at some point you got to get down to it. And if you say, and that's where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to get an answer out of you. You've both been very critical of what we have today. I am too. I'm looking for solutions. I'm not just looking for us to all show how intelligent we are, or not.
Well, I think that one of the things we could address.
I appreciate it, Doc.
Senator.
I'm gonna run out of time. Let me ask. I'm thinking about introducing a bill. In fact, we're working on it to take the principles of the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU. I never thought I would do something like this, but take the principles in the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU and have those principles apply here in the United States. Ms. Bickert, would you support that bill?
Senator, I focus on content, but there are people at our company we can have follow up on that.
Ms. Culbertson, that's a dodge. Ms. Culbertson, would you vote for it?
We certainly comply with GDPR. There are some tensions with the First Amendment in the U.S., but we'd welcome a longer conversation about this. But generally, yes.
Yes?
Yes, Senator.
God bless you. God bless you.
US law.
Thank you for an answer. Ms. I'm sorry, but I'm mispronouncing your name. Veach?
Senator, it's Veach, yes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Veach. I apologize. Will you vote? If you were a senator, would you vote for it?
Senator, I'm not an expert on GDPR. I can tell you on privacy, what we want to do is give our users security.
I know you want privacy, but your whole model is built around finding out everything you can about me other than my DNA, and you may have it for all I know. And I'm not trying to be rude, but I can't tell you the number of these hearings I have been to. And I learn something every time. But when we get down to it, what are we going to do about it? Nobody wants to answer. And you're supposed to be our experts. And I would strongly encourage you to come to these hearings with positions, firm positions, on behalf of yourselves or on behalf of your companies that you're ready to take. Don't just word whip us. We're trying to solve a problem here.
Senator Kennedy?
What? Yes, sir.
I have to ask you for a yes or no answer. Do you realize you've gone over time?
Well, I realize that, yes, and I realize everybody else has gone over time.
Take another minute and then please wrap it up.
I'm done.
Thank you, sir. Senator Ossoff?
Is settled, but I'm very, very pleased that my friend and colleague, Senator Kennedy, is here. I want to invite him to ask his questions to the witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like you so much better than Durbin. I just want to state that.
Appreciate that, sir. I'm going to have the record printed out and put on my wall, sir.
Please do that. Oh, let me see here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Is my time running?
Sir, I will give you as much grace as you request in your clock. So do not worry about that. I know you just walked in,
okay.
And I would ask. Thank you very much. I would ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The clock has been reset to 5 minutes. As soon as you are ready, sir, we'll start counting.
Mr. Davis, congratulations first. Tell me what you think we ought to do about, if anything, about qualified immunity for police officers.
Thank you for the question, Senator. As you know, it is a very challenging issue. That one is that's being worked on by Senator Booker and Senator Scott. And I think the challenge that it presents is that there's very little doubt that we need to protect officers and provide immunity when they operate in good faith. At the same time, though, we have to be concerned that we don't protect those who willfully and knowingly violate the law. And I think most cops would agree with me that bad cops should not be protected. So I think there has to be a revisit and to try to really resolve that dilemma, for lack of a better phrase. And I look forward to seeing what the group comes up with.
Do you think we ought to get rid of qualified immunity?
Outright, no, sir, I do not.
Okay, all right. Judge Grigsby, good morning.
Senator.
Let's suppose that you are the owner of a privately owned, because you own it, shopping center. And you adopt a rule that applies to everybody who comes to your shopping center to purchase items. And your rule is nobody can petition, nobody can set up a table and try to get signatures in my shopping center. My shopping center is just for people to come and buy things. And you don't discriminate on the basis of the petition advocates. You just say all are prohibited. And you do that under your Fifth Amendment right. Under federal law, is that legal for you to do that?
Thank you, Senator, very much for that question. And your hypothetical raises a number of potential issues in terms of the ability to gather, free speech, et cetera. It would depend upon the specific fact pattern. I would say that, generally speaking, of course, as a federal judge, I'm governed by precedent on issues such as the First Amendment, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and that would be the question I would look at in terms of analyzing that. The fact that it's a private shopping center.
Yeah, but if I could interrupt you, if you're the owner of the shopping center, so you have a Fifth Amendment right to property, and you adopt this rule that says nobody can come here and petition. I don't care who you are or what it's about. That would be in conflict with the petitioner's First Amendment right to petition. Under the current state of federal law, if the petitioners sue you, who wins?
Well, again, Senator, I think it would depend somewhat on the facts. In your hypothetical, you're talking about a private owner, so it's not state action. So that would certainly be relevant in terms of analyzing the question. But I think it would depend. There are two different strains of constitutional interests that you've raised, which I understand in your hypothetical, and it had to be analyzed carefully under both.
Okay. Judge Boardman, good morning.
Good morning.
Tell me what the rational basis test is.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy, for that question. I understand that is probably the first level of review in a constitutional question, and certainly if that matter were before me in a constitutional matter, I would research the law, including Supreme Court precedent, binding Fourth Circuit precedent, and I would apply it where applicable.
What is it? Can you define the test for me?
I cannot, sitting here right now, sir. Whenever I'm faced with any new legal issue, I do the research and I find the answers through research in the case law.
Okay, so you don't know? Okay. What's a penumbra?
Thank you, Senator. My understanding of a penumbra are those rights recognized in the Constitution that are not specifically enumerated.
Okay. We know that privacy is a penumbra, do we not?
That's my understanding, Senator.
Are there any other Supreme Court holdings defining other penumbras?
Senator, I'm sure that there are.
Could you help me there?
I understand there's a right to travel that is not specifically enumerated in the Constitution.
Yes, ma'am. Anything else?
Again, I am sure there are, and I'm happy
That's okay.
to.
Let me ask you one last question. When we look for a fundamental right in the Constitution, and we know from Supreme Court precedent that you and I have fundamental rights according to Supreme Court precedent, we have fundamental rights that are not expressly delineated in the Constitution. One example is the right to privacy that we just talked about. What is the Supreme Court standard for looking at the Constitution and saying, even though it's not expressly delineated, we think that Americans under our Constitution have this fundamental right?
Thank you, Senator Kennedy, for that question. It's hard for me to answer that in the abstract. What I do in every case when I'm presented with a question like that is I research the law and I find Supreme Court precedent on it. So in order to answer that question, I would need to do research to tell you what the standard is.
Well, let me ask, I'm not asking the direct answer. I probably didn't ask that very artfully. I'm trying to understand your appreciation of the state of law. Let's suppose I litigate a case and I say I have a fundamental right to education. And my case reaches the United States Supreme Court. Now, I think we can both agree that the Constitution does not say expressly that I have a fundamental right to education for me, or let's say for my children. Let's suppose I'm arguing that it is implied in the Constitution. What test is the Supreme Court going to use to try to determine whether I or my children have a fundamental right to education? If I argue that it's an implied right, a penumbra, if you will.
Thank you, Senator. Certainly, it's very difficult for me as a sitting magistrate judge to speculate what the Supreme Court would do. But based on my reading of Supreme Court opinions, certainly the Supreme Court looks to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the 14th Amendment, the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Okay. On an issue like that, a right that's not expressly stated in the Constitution, but it's very important, obviously. We know that absence of education is the root of a lot of our social problems in America. Which branch of government do you think is better suited to make that decision? The decision being whether I have a fundamental right to education. The legislative branch or the judicial branch?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. Certainly the role of the judiciary is to interpret the laws that Congress passes and the Constitution. Mm-hmm. To the extent that interpretation leads the Supreme Court to find a right to education, then that is within their province. Certainly the legislature passes laws to fund schools and to govern education. So each body has its own role.
But what I'm asking is, between the two branches, which branch, in your judgment, is better equipped to decide whether Americans have a fundamental right to education?
Thank you, Senator, for that question.
I'm just asking for your judgment.
I think when it comes to interpreting the Constitution, that is within the province of the Supreme Court, and to the extent that there is a fundamental right to education that's recognized by the Supreme Court, that would be the law of the land.
Yeah. What do you think about this point of view? Judges are constrained by the case before them, the law and the facts. you're constrained by the record. You can't stop a trial and say, I want to hold hearings from experts throughout the world to determine the importance of education. You've got to make a case on the record. A legislature can. So a legislature has access to a greater breadth of expertise and knowledge to decide a case, an issue like that. Why wouldn't the legislative branch be better suited to decide a fundamental question like that than the court in a narrow case?
As the witness prepares to answer, Senator Kennedy is probably one of the only senators I would give this kind of grace. He's going on for about 11 minutes.
I'm sorry.
And sir, no, you can continue to go on. You're my friend. I just think there might be other senators waiting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I was the last one, Mr. Chairman.
You may be. I was just told that we might have others.
No, I am so sorry. I apologize profusely to the chairman and to you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you,
I want to thank folks. I was told that perhaps, I know they're logged in, but again.
Senator Moran. You can go, Senator Kennedy. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Director, thank you for being here today. I know how busy you are. I've been in my office listening to some of the testimony of both of you, and I'm a little uncertain about some of the answers, which is probably a shortcoming on my part. Madam Director, could you in 1 minute summarize for me what the recommendations are today from your agency about wearing masks?
Absolutely. First of all, can I just say thank you for your YouTube video for promoting vaccines, which I just adored.
Did you like my singing?
Yeah, I did. Thank you very much for doing
You're under oath.
Yes, I did. Even so, I did.
Thank you for that.
Last Thursday, we released guidance that demonstrated for an individual who is fully vaccinated and not immunocompromised, that they are able to safely unmask, with the exceptions, certain exceptions, of course, in travel corridors, healthcare settings, that if you are an individual, you can safely unmask if you're fully vaccinated.
Inside and outside?
Inside and outside.
Okay. What role do the state regulations play with respect to that?
We are working now to update all areas of guidance, but here's what is really, I think, important to understand. We are not a homogeneous United States. We have counties that have less than 20% vaccination.
Yes, ma'am, but I don't want to get too off the question here. If I walk over to the House of Representatives, do I have to wear a mask?
Those are locally driven policies, but we felt that it was important for the science for us to convey the science of what is safe for individuals.
Well, I'm trying to understand the CDC recommendations, and I appreciate it. Based on CDC recommendations, if I walk over to the House, are you recommending I wear a mask?
If you are by yourself walking over to the House and you're fully vaccinated?
No, ma'am, once I'm over there. I'm vaccinated. Once I'm over there and I'm talking to some of my colleagues.
We have really encouraged that the policies of mask wearing be locally driven, and the reason for that is because every community, every county has different rates of disease and different rates of vaccination, and that's really
what's different about the House? Do you know?
I don't know the rate of vaccination around the Capitol nor the rate of disease around the Capitol off the top of my head.
Okay. What about airplanes?
What is the policy on airplanes? The policy on airplanes is to wear a mask.
Okay. And why is it different on an airplane as opposed to a restaurant?
So the CDC provides guidance for what is safe to do. The federal policy is obviously an interagency policy that we need to look at across different agencies. What I will say, though, is that there's very little choice when you board an airplane as to who's going to be sitting next to you, who's around you. And also, airplanes may be a place where we have more variance because of the travel from international places.
Okay. Last question. What, in your opinion, was the origin of the virus?
This has been studied by the WHO.
Ma'am, I'm asking your opinion.
I don't believe I've seen enough data, individual data, for me to be able to comment on that.
What are the possibilities?
Certainly the possibilities of that most coronaviruses that we know of are of origin from, that have infected the population, SARS-CoV-1, MERS, generally come from an animal origin. And
are there any other possibilities?
Certainly a lab-based origin is one possibility.
Okay. Is the United States funding gain-of-function research?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Can you get an answer to that for me and let us know, let the committee know?
Dr. Fauci would be the one who knows best, and he testified last
week. Dr. Fauci seems confused. I'm asking, with all due respect, I'm asking you to get us that information. Where throughout the world, including but not limited to the United States of America, are we doing research on these viruses to make them contagious in order to study them? That's what I mean by gain of function.
I understand. We certainly can have our staff look into this. I don't know that we have the access of labs across the world, just the ones that are funded here in the
United States. But you're the head of CDC. I bet if I bet that you get your phone calls returned.
Okay.
Would you get us that information?
I'd be happy to give you the information to the best of my ability.
Okay. And I'm going to do a complete album of my singing. I'll send you a courtesy.
Will you sign up, please?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Baldwin.
Of Mr. Chipman. Where's Mr. Chipman? You're nominated for alcohol, tobacco, and firearms and explosives and all kind of other dangerous stuff. Is that right?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. You don't believe in private ownership of handguns, do you?
That's incorrect. I own one myself.
Do you? Do you believe in private ownership of assault weapons?
Yes,
what do you own, by the way?
That's a pretty private question. I have I'll share the gun I'm proudest of. It's a Smith & Wesson Treasury commemorative gun, and the serial number is my birth date.
Oh, that's cool. Congratulations. Do you believe in banning assault weapons?
I do, sir.
Okay. Define assault weapons.
Assault weapons would be something that members of Congress would define.
Well, how do you define it? You're going to be running the agency.
Senator, I think this is a good question. If I am confirmed as ATF director...
I got 35 seconds left. Define it for me, would you please, sir? What's an assault weapon?
Yeah, Senator, the bill to ban assault weapons is
what is your
dozens of pages.
Of
There's no way I could define an assault weapon.
You don't have any. You're going to run this agency, and you don't have a definition of assault weapon.
But I would be enforcing the definition that members of Congress
you're going to be
passed.
issuing rules and regulations. Just give me your definition.
I'll give you one definition that ATF.
Give me your definition.
Uses. One definition that ATF currently.
Give me your definition.
I can give you one definition.
If you won't answer my question, how can I vote for you? I'm done, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I'm going to get an answer.
Thank you. Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you could probably guess from my opening comments, Madam Secretary, I see the climate as a discrete scientific issue. I think it's a mistake to approach it with too much emotion. Passion is good, but not when it interferes with your judgment. I've got a couple of 30,000-foot feet questions. How much money in public and private dollars does the department think it would take to make the world carbon neutral?
I don't have a number for that, but probably a lot.
Yeah. Hundreds of trillions of dollars, you think?
It would be a lot, for sure.
How much money in public and private dollars does the department think it would take to make the United States carbon neutral?
Again, it would be a lot.
Hundreds of trillions?
I don't know about hundreds of trillions, but it would be a lot of money.
It'd be in the trillions.
Yes.
Mid-trillions.
I don't know.
I understand. Here's my question. To make the United States carbon neutral based on the administration's plans, I think it would be fair to say it's going to cause displacement, major displacement. Now, I don't use that in a pejorative sense. I think it's just an accurate description. It's going to change our economy dramatically. Many people are going to gain. Many people are going to lose. And that's what I mean by displacement. If we today spent these, to be fair, tens of trillions of dollars that I think many members of the administration would like to spend, and make the United States of America carbon neutral, and nobody else has adopts our aggressive approach, and they only make modest gains in CO2 emissions, how much is it going to lower the world temperature, and how much is of it? How much are we going to reduce carbon emissions?
I want to say that the administration has a really firm commitment to communities to be able to take advantage of the economic opportunity.
I know, Madam
clean energy,
Secretary,
and that
and forgive me
means
for
workers,
interrupting,
too.
but we both know now, I really want to try to probe your mind here. We both know this is going to cause major displacement. Let's don't kid each other. You're not going to turn coal miners into coders overnight, and you're not going to turn fossil fuel workers into solar experts overnight, and there are not as many solar jobs as there are oil and gas. So I don't want to get off into that. And I'm not trying to be critical of the administration, but these are important questions. If we become carbon neutral and we don't get cooperation from China and India, what have we accomplished?
The goal is to get cooperation from China. And
I know, but what if they don't?
Well,
What if we go spend these tens of trillions of dollars, and President Xi Jinping, the people of China are wonderful people, by the way. President Xi lies like he breathes. We know that. The Communist Party, they're gangsters. What if they've probably built a coal-powered power plant while you and I have been talking. What have we achieved?
The administration has a strategy to make sure that all of the people who have signed on to this Paris Agreement meet the goals that they have articulated. And that means working with allies, and that means a strategy
I get it,
to ensure
Madam
that.
Chair, but I'm asking a very practical question. My son, who I love dearly, has a strategy to have his dad buy him a 911 Targa Porsche. It's not going to happen. And I'm raising a very legitimate question, I think. If we spend these trillions of dollars and we go through all this displacement and we don't get cooperation from China and India, what is the pain worth the gain? And how do we know?
I would say we have a strategy to get those countries on board. And if we don't pursue this strategy, what then? Then you have climate disasters that are upon us. California could be on fire again this summer. And if we don't take action, then where are we with respect to the other disasters? So we have to approach our allies.
Let me ask you one last question.
And do our own.
I get it.
Yeah.
If you can indulge me, Madam Chair. If we spend all the money that the Biden administration wants to spend, let's take in its current infrastructure bill to reduce CO2 emissions, what percentage of the increase in carbon emissions worldwide, not the United States, is going to be reduced?
Well, all of these countries have signed on. All of them have.
No, I'm talking about, I know, and you're trusting them. But
Well, no,
I
verify.
believe in metrics.
Yeah.
If you spend a lot of taxpayer dollars, you ought to know, first of all, what you expect to get and realistically assess whether you're going to get it. I don't want to go to, let me ask you one last question. How come your budget doesn't request any funding for the Yucca Mountain licensing?
The the administration doesn't support Yucca Mountain as a solution for nuclear waste.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Well, that's very
We
kind of
can
you.
ask you to do it jointly,
That gives us 10 minutes?
Yeah, really.
but you have to fight over the 10 minutes.
I'll try to not take my whole time here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Counselor, how are you? Good morning. Congratulations.
Thank you so
Do
much.
you think the Constitution should be used to create new rights?
Senator, I think the Constitution is an enduring document and that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's been around a long time. It's enduring. And I'm fond of it. You love it. I'm fond of it too. But do you think it ought to be used to create new rights?
Senator, I think it is constantly being interpreted, and the Supreme Court has, through the 230 years of jurisprudence, has found rights in it.
Yeah.
And if I am confirmed as an appellate judge, I would faithfully apply Supreme Court precedent.
Yeah. But are you going to use it to try to create new rights?
Senator, appellate court judges don't create new rights. They take the record below them.
Sure they do, Counselor. We've both been at this a long time. They do it all the time. And then it goes up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says yay or nay, or sometimes they don't say anything. Let me ask you this. What barometer should we use to decide whether a federal judge ought to create a new right or the people's elected representatives through a Congress or a legislature? What's the standard you use there?
Senator, we have co-equal branches of government. The legislature does the policy making, the judiciary.
Yeah, but what's the standard? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we had this problem in the last administration, and we have it in this administration. If you could just answer my question, because 5 minutes just goes like that. What standard do you use personally to decide whether a new right ought to be created by a federal judge or by the United States Congress if it's a federal right?
Senator, I would be applying precedent, and precedent has
I stipulate
standards of
that you're
review.
going to apply precedent. I stipulate that, so let's take that off the table. What standard should be used to determine whether a new right ought to be created by a court, a federal judge, unelected, appointed for life, or a United States Congress?
Senator, appellate courts have standards of review when looking toward lower court decisions, and I would apply
Come on,
that
Counselor,
standard.
you're not answering my question. It's a real simple question, and you're very smart, and you know what I'm asking. You believe in a living Constitution, okay? I get that. That's a legitimate point of view. You say you don't understand what an originalist is, but I don't think you're being candid there. But this is what let me ask my question again. What standard should be used to decide if you're going to create a new right in the Constitution, whether that right ought to be created by a federal judge or the people's elected representative? Very simple.
Senator, the federal courts are of limited jurisdiction. The appellate courts sit in between a Supreme Court.
Okay, you're not going to answer it. I get it. When you were at the Brennan Center, you're still there, right?
I'm on leave, sir.
Okay, well, but when you were there, did you advocate federal courts create new rights under the Constitution?
No, sir.
You never did?
No, sir.
Okay.
Right to vote is protected in the Constitution, and it's protected.
So you never asked for new rights, you just said they're already there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How do you know a right's already there if it's not explicit?
In the case of voting?
No, just in general. If I read your resume and it's not, something's on there, well, that's a bad example. If you look at the Constitution and it doesn't, let's say reparations, okay? And it doesn't talk about reparations. How do you know whether a right should be granted if it's not there? That's what I understand you to be saying with the living Constitution.
Senator, again, a case would not come before an appellate court unless parties presented an argument.
I get that. I understand how a lawsuit's tried. Let me ask you again. How do you know if a right's not explicit in the U.S. Constitution that it's really there? It's hiding, it's lurking, and we just have never seen it.
Senator, in Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court said that the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution.
Right.
I would look to precedent. I would look to see.
What if there's no precedent?
There's always some precedent.
See, here's my problem, Counselor. This is where I think you're headed. I think what you want to do on the federal bench is advance a social agenda and rewrite the Constitution every other Thursday to advance a social agenda that you can't get by the voters through their elected representatives.
Senator.
Now, that's a legitimate thing to be for. This is America. You can believe what you want, but you spent your whole career doing that. And it bothers me that you're not defending that here, that you're dodging my questions.
Senator.
You're not the only nominee who's done that. It happened under the prior administration. It must be something in the water at the White House. But I'd respect you a lot more if you just up front said it.
Senator, I believe in the value of precedent. I think it makes our system.
So do I, but that's got nothing to do with our discussion. We both know that. And I understand that you've been advised to say precedent, precedent, precedent. When in doubt, is it raining outside? Precedent. But it inhibits our ability to have a rational discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Kennedy is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I read your editorial in the Wall Street Journal today about the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act. For what it's worth, I agree with most of it. It's a damn good bill, by the way, if I may say so.
I want to thank you for, I think it helps us do our job both at the SEC and at the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board.
I appreciate that. I agree with you, obviously. There's a 3-year implementation period, as you know. Foreign companies, including our friends in China, have 3 years to comply. The Senate's passed a bill reducing that to 2 years. We're having a little trouble getting the House to take it up. Would you be willing to contribute your considerable efforts to encouraging the House to take it up?
Senator, I've already had some discussions and expressed to some of the leadership over there that I support that.
Okay. Who pays corporate income taxes?
Senator, it's the corporation that pays the taxes, of course, then ultimately the owners of those corporations are the shareholders.
Corporations just is not a payor. It's a tax collector, isn't it?
Well, I'm not here as an expert on the tax code. I think the corporation
you're an expert
literally.
on corporations. I think economists are generally in agreement that the corporation is not a payer; it's a tax collector. The owners and the customers and the workers that Chairman Brown spoke so eloquently about actually pay the tax, don't they?
Well, again, I'd never want to mince words, but I think that the corporation, of course, is paying, and then the shareholders have less net income.
Don't the workers pay it too?
I think that it's a cost of the corporation. It, like all costs of the corporation, those costs compete with each other. Even the cost of the real estate.
Do the workers pay it? I'm just trying to. I don't have much time. Sorry about that.
The workers pay individual income tax, workers pay Social Security tax, and the like.
I just want to be sure I understand your testimony, Mr. Chairman. You're saying that the workers are not impacted at all by the corporate income tax?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking a different question. All costs in a company compete with each other, whether it's the real estate costs or any other costs.
Are the workers impacted negatively by corporate income tax? Real simple question.
No, I understand it, but I think it's best as the head of the SEC to leave debates about taxes to Congress. I really do think that that's
I understand
something.
why you don't want to answer it. I get it. Look, I don't mean any disrespect to you. I followed your career. You've had quite a career in public service. You've made a lot of money on Wall Street. I respect that. I honor that. But as to the people and the companies that you regulate as chairman of the SEC, do you consider yourself to be their daddy?
No.
Then why do you act like it?
I try to take the oath of office seriously that the SEC is set up to promote investor protection and facilitate capital formation and that which is in the middle.
Yeah, but why do you impose your personal preferences about cultural issues and social issues on companies and therefore their customers and their workers? Like climate change and the Second Amendment. I mean, I'm sure you have personal feelings about abortion. Do you have plans to implement or impose those values on companies?
So I want to thank you for the compliment you gave me, and I've followed your career and have the deepest respect for you too, sir. I think that I am not doing that. I think what I've been trying to do is say, if investors want information about climate risk, and it looks like tens of trillions of dollars of assets under management of asking, we at the SEC have a role to put something out to notice and comment, do the economic analysis, and really see what investors are saying. It's really in that narrow set of chalk lines that we're operating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Kennedy. Senator Tester from Senator Kennedy from Louisiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Secretary and Mr. Chairman, for being here. Madam Secretary, when you were here last, and we all look forward to you coming, I asked you to tell me what you thought inflation would be at the end of this year, and you told me 2%. Do you still stand by that prediction?
Clearly, inflation this year is going to be above 2%. Just the experience so far this year makes that clearly true. But I think we are seeing monthly inflation rates taper off.
Yes, ma'am. What do you think it'll be at the end of the year, if not 2%?
Probably closer to 4%.
Okay.
And that's already almost must be the case based on what's happened this year. But in my estimation, there are the types of supply bottlenecks that the economy.
I don't want to spend too much time on inflation, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have so little time, and I talk slowly. What party controls the House?
The Democrats.
What party controls the Senate?
The Democrats.
I believe we can agree that President Biden is a Democrat.
I believe.
Okay. Senator Schumer, who's a Democrat, and my friend, controls the Senate floor. And he can raise the debt ceiling by just amending the budget resolution, can't he?
It's possible that that could be done.
Yes, ma'am. So why doesn't he do it? Why don't y'all do it?
Because
and then
this
we
is,
don't. Let me
because
just
this is.
Let me just finish. Why don't y'all just do it and then we don't have this fight?
Because
why do you insist on doing it the hard way?
Because it's very important to recognize that raising the debt ceiling is about paying bills that Congresses
I know,
have
but I just
incurred
gave
in
you
the
a way.
past. And it's
I don't
a
want to get off
shared
the subject.
responsibility.
So why
And
don't you, I agree
Democrats
with that.
have-
So why don't you just amend the budget resolution?
Democrats have provided votes in the past when both houses of Congress are controlled by Republicans, when the Republican Party was in the middle of reconciliation. 2017 is a good example, and Democrats pitched in to do their duty to raise the debt ceiling.
But I know all that, and and I appreciate your perspective, but let me ask you again. There's a real simple solution. Why don't y'all just amend the budget resolution? It just takes 50 votes by my Democratic friends and the vice president. Why don't you just do that? Problem solved. Done. Easy peasy. Finished. Let's go have a cocktail.
Well, it will be up to the leadership of Congress to
Are you going to recommend that he do that?
We will confer with them on what is the best strategy to move forward.
Yeah. It's not often, I haven't been around this place as long as you have. But it's not often around here that we have a problem that has an easy solution. And this is a real easy solution. And I get politics. I understand why politically you folks want to have Republican fingerprints on the spending fiscal knife. I get that. But do you really, is your politics so important that you want to gamble here on the sovereign debt of the United States when you have a very, very simple solution that you refuse to take?
I want to see that the debt ceiling is raised. As I've said, I believe it would be catastrophic not to do so, but I equally believe that deficits have been run under both Democratic and Republican administrations. It's important to recognize that, and that means that paying the bills for those deficits is a shared responsibility, and it should not be the responsibility
I agree with
of any
that.
one party.
Very eloquently put. But it's a fact, isn't it? That you and your folks just want Republican fingerprints on the Democrats' effort to tax, spend, and regulate America into Europe. Now, it's your prerogative to do that. But this is all about the administration's desire to have Republican fingerprints on it and later call it bipartisan. And you know that, Madam Secretary, with all the respect I can muster, and so do the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kennedy, I rarely speak between witnesses, but I wonder if Secretary Yellen takes you up on the offer to go get a cocktail, if you would pay or you'd skip out on paying the bill and expect Secretary Yellen to pay. Senator Menendez is recognized from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had not intended to pursue this line of questioning, but I must say my distinguished friend and colleague from Louisiana always sparks my interest. Republican.
Senator Kennedy.
Congratulations, Judge. I enjoyed meeting your family. As I understand the case, the religious liberty case, you ruled that government in California could prohibit a small group of people from worshiping their God at home because of the risk of COVID. Is that basically correct?
Inside the home, outside the home, three households could gather.
Inside the home.
Yes.
This was in this was in California?
Yes, the restrictions were specifically that were challenged.
Yes, ma'am.
Were Santa Clara County and
I've only got a limited
California.
amount of time. I'm just trying to, it was in California.
That's correct.
Sorry to interrupt you. Is there something about COVID in California that makes it more likely for a handful of people in their home who are worshiping Allah or the Dalai Lama to get COVID than a handful of people in a strip club?
California, and particularly my county where my courthouse is based, had the first confirmed death of COVID in February 5th of 2020.
Was it in a strip club?
No, you were just asking me what were the situations in.
Yeah, this one.
Excuse me. Go ahead, please, sir.
In this case, didn't you want to just kind of step back and say, this is craziness? You know, my government here in California is prohibiting a handful of people from worshiping their God because of the risks of COVID. But the same people, if they want to, can go to a strip club. Does that make sense to you?
The evidence that was before me.
I understand that, but it doesn't make sense for the American people. I don't want to beat this.
Senator Durbin. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, congratulations. I'm not going to ask you to comment on any Supreme Court precedent or how you're going to rule on cases. I just want to try to, as Senator Durbin suggested, get to know you a little bit. You serve right now on the Los Angeles County Superior Court. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Is the Los Angeles County Superior Court, in your opinion, systemically racist?
Thank you for that question, Senator Kennedy. So I think that questions regarding racism, regarding systemic racism, again, are very important ones for policymakers to be focused on. I'm focused on my day-to-day work as a judge on the cases that come before me, and I think that I best serve my duty as a judge by keeping that rigorous focus.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have so little time, and I've got several questions. Do you consider the court to be systemically racist? Do you sit on it right now or not?
Again, Senator Kennedy, I feel that I best serve my duty as a judge by focusing on the individual cases that come before me, individual questions.
But the court is an institution. Do you is it? I mean, I think it's a pretty straightforward question. Is it systemically racist or not? The Los Angeles County Superior Court.
I understand your question, but I think that those kinds of questions are best left to policymakers, and that as a judge, that what I need to do is to focus on my cases.
You don't want to answer it. I get it. To explain the Erie Doctrine to me. You're going to see that a lot on the Ninth Circuit.
Thank you for the question, Senator Kennedy. Now, in my 14 years as an attorney, as appellate advocate, having handled many different cases, I never had a case regarding the Erie Doctrine. I'm sure I learned about it in law school. Yeah. I don't recall it sitting here before you now, but I'm certain that I'd be able to look it up and find the answer for you and come up.
Are you familiar with Erie v. Tompkins?
I am familiar with the existence of the decision. I'm sure that I read it in law school. I haven't read it recently.
Okay. All right. Name a public policy that you think is a good idea but is unconstitutional.
Thank you for the question. Given that I am a sitting judge and a judicial nominee bound by codes of conduct, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to comment on policies that I believe are constitutional or unconstitutional.
No, I'm not asking to do that. I'm saying, tell me a policy that you like that has already been declared by the courts that's unconstitutional.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. So I, as a judge now, and again, if confirmed, am bound to follow Supreme Court precedent. I'm bound to follow Ninth Circuit.
I know
precedent.
that, and I'm running out of time. And if you don't want to answer, I get it. I've got other questions.
Well, it's
Can
not. I'm sorry.
Can you name me a public policy? I'm not debating the legality of it. I'll stipulate that it's unconstitutional, where that you think is a good public policy regardless.
Well, thank you. But in my view, I am not served, and my oath is not served by me commenting about my personal views, because my personal views don't drive what I do as a judge, which is to follow the law in every case without reservation,
Right.
whether I think something is a good
Okay,
or
I'm
bad
running out of
policy.
time, Judge. I still don't understand any of your answers. Let me try one more. Here's a hot topic. Tell me the legal basis for a universal injunction.
Thank you. So injunctions are governed by Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 65. The court has said that injunctions are an extraordinary remedy, and I understand that they are. So the legal basis for a universal injunction or a nationwide injunction is whether it is necessary to give the plaintiffs complete relief, but without imposing an undue burden on
Is that case law or constitutional law?
That's case law.
And what's the cases? What are the cases?
I can't cite for you the specific case, but I've reviewed cases about universal injunctions and understand again that that's an extraordinary remedy, very fact-bound determination about whether those should be issued.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Before recognizing Senator Blumenthal.
Did you say I support compelled disclosure of political donations by wealthy individuals but not by minorities?
First, Senator Kennedy, thank you for the gift of the notepads for my children. I really appreciate it. I don't recall using those words before, Senator. I do remember.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I've got a bunch here. You've described yourself as a, quote, wild-eyed sort of leftist. Do I have that right?
Senator, I think I was referring to a caricature of the way that I think other people may have described me, not how I would describe myself. And I want to assure you that I understand that the role of a judge is to set aside whatever personal views that person may have.
I heard your testimony. Have you called republicanism, well, strike that. Did you say, quote, republicanism is an anti-democratic virus?
No, Senator, I don't believe I've used those words.
Okay, you're under oath now.
Yes, Senator, I don't believe I've used those words.
Okay.
I do remember saying last year that there was a loss of confidence in our elections that has spread kind of like a virus.
Right. Well, that's a long way from calling the Republican Party an anti-democratic virus.
Yes, it's very different, and I don't believe I used those words, Senator.
Right. If you did use those words, will you pull down your nomination?
Senator, I don't believe I've used those words.
But if you did, will you withdraw?
It's hard for me to imagine a scenario in which I would
I'm just
use
saying,
those
assume
words.
it. If you said it, will you withdraw?
If I were quoting someone else saying it to describe that kind of sentence, I wouldn't be expressing my own views. But Senator, I don't believe I've ever used those words. I've represented.
Did you when you sent out those personal tweets about Senator Cotton, Senator Blackburn, and Senator Cornyn? Did you mean them at the time?
Without hearing those tweets, Senator Kennedy, it's hard for me to remember precisely, what was said or what I was thinking at the time. I do very much regret the tone that I've taken on social media from time to time. I know that I've crossed the line from time to time, and
When you crossed the line, did you mean it?
Without knowing the specific context or the specific tweet that you're referring to, Senator Kennedy. It's kind of hard for me to say, but
do you generally tweet things you don't mean?
Senator Kennedy, I would agree with you that Twitter has become a very coarse place.
I don't want to debate Twitter. Do you generally tweet things that you don't mean?
Well, Senator Kennedy, I've contributed to the coarseness on Twitter sometimes by pushing the envelope to break through.
But when you did it, did you mean it?
It's hard for me to respond to that kind of generally, Senator Kennedy, without a specific
You're a smart
example.
guy. Sure you can. You either meant it or you didn't. You got two choices, door A, door B.
Well, Senator Kennedy, I know that I've pushed the envelope.
Okay.
And
Do you regret it?
I do regret it, Senator.
Do you regret it because you didn't mean it? Or do you regret it because it might cause you not to be confirmed?
Senator Kennedy, I regret it because I think it's contributed to the coarseness of our discourse overall, and I think it would be better.
When did you have this epiphany that everybody has equal dignity and worth? When you were nominated, or?
Well, I believe you're
including Republicans.
Well, I believe you're referring to my religious faith.
No, I'm not.
Senator.
I'm referring to your coarseness.
Well, the equal dignity and worth is a principle of my religious faith, Senator.
It's also a principle of morals and good judgment. I'm over. Mr. Ho, you're a smart man, I can tell. But I think you're an angry man. And I really have great concerns about voting for you. We don't need federal judges who are angry. We need federal judges who are fair and can see both points of view. And you said these things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. The 4 district court nominees on today's panel come from a diverse background of experiences. You've worked